Hello, this is James Robert Deal, and today is July the 19th, 2017, here in Lynnwood, Washington. I'm running for City Council Position 1 on August 1st. I hope that you'll vote for me. And tonight I want to talk about one of the big issues for me, and that is that our water is not fit to drink. And I invite you to go to jamesrobertdeal.org/safewater. You can read in great density what's wrong with it, how it came to be. It's one of the bigger scams in history. Other examples of similar scams are such as tetraethyl lead and DDT and cigarettes and Roundup, all of which the people who make a profit off of them say are safe and effective or okay. And one of the first hurdles I have to overcome when I'm talking with people about this subject is they look at me and they say, well, you're saying that the government is misleading us. How do we know that you're not misleading us? And it is a good question, but it indicates that the people asking that question are overly trusting of their government. Politically, this state is divided into naive Democrats, naive independents, and naive Republicans. They all seem to blindly trust their government agencies. The CDC says, oh, fluoride's good. The dentists say it's good. And if you want to get a job teaching at the University of Washington Dental School, you better not oppose fluoridation. If you want to get a job as the chief health officer in Snohomish County, you better not be against fluoridation. So there are quick action squads that the fluoridation people have organized. Whenever somebody posts something anywhere online, they're ready to jump on it and make comments. The way fluoridation got started was in itself a scam. It was during World War II that Alcoa had excess fluoride, including on its aluminum plant in Oregon, right by the Dowels. So the fluoride was coming out of the smokestacks, and it was killing the cows, and farmers were suing Alcoa. Well, Alcoa wanted to buttress their legal defense by making fluoride a good word. So Alcoa was the first to sell sodium fluoride as something to put in drinking water. The family that was controlled Alcoa also controlled the Kettering Institute, which gave fluoridation legitimacy, and harked back to a dentist in Colorado who found that people who had Colorado brown stain on their teeth were drinking water that was high in calcium fluoride. And he concluded that it was the fluoride that made their teeth resistant to tooth decay. What he omitted was that the water in question was also very rich in minerals such as calcium and magnesium, and it was the calcium and the magnesium that was making the teeth strong. And it wasn't because of the fluoride, it was in spite of the fluoride. So in Arkansas in the 1940s, this came up again. Alcoa had a bauxite mine there. So they put two and two together, and they turned toxic waste into a cash flow. So it was done starting in 1945 by the National Health Service, which was a department of it was under the War Department at the time, and it was done as a war measure. So it was really not challenged or questioned, although at the time there were doctors and dentists who were dead set against it and were exactly right. The levels of fluoride in your drinking water, of course, don't kill you immediately, but they accumulate in your body over time. So if you drank 2 liters of water a day, or food cooked with water, the equivalent of 2 liters a day, you're getting 1.4 milliliters of fluoride. Your kidneys can excrete half of it, so that means 0.7 milligrams of it goes into your bones. And that's the way that the body protects itself from fluoride, is it sucks it into the bones, and there it stays, because fluoride loves to bond ionically with calcium and magnesium, and that's what the bones are made of. So once it's in there, it's never going to come out. Or some people say half of it will come out in 20 years. Well, and the reason why it won't come out is because the pH in the bones is very alkaline, and you cannot separate calcium from fluoride unless the pH is acidic, and inside the bone it'll never get there. So the fluoridation was started with sodium fluoride, which comes from production of uranium and aluminum. But pretty soon, as soon as the National Health Service says, after a short test, that this is safe and effective, ignoring the results of their own data, then it started to be adopted everywhere, and people said, well, how wonderful that we can prevent tooth decay by drinking toxic waste. There wasn't enough sodium fluoride, and so the people who make superphosphate fertilizer thought, well, great, we've got fluoride too, we want to get in on this cash flow. And so they had fluorosilicic acid to sell, also called hydrofluorosilicic acid, also called HFS. And it's different because it breaks down into silicic acid, and silicic acid is an excellent lead solvent. Sodium fluoride is not such a great lead solvent, although it does dissolve lead. Chlorine dissolves lead. Chloramine dissolves lead. In this area we use chlorine to sanitize our water. Back in Flint they use chloramine, which is chlorine and ammonia. And the difference is that chlorine will evaporate out of your water if you just set it open in a bowl or a pitcher overnight, whereas chloramine will not evaporate out, and they put it in there because it stays and keeps killing the bacteria. I believe that we should use ozonation instead of chlorination, chlormination, and we should probably sanitize the water and give it a final finish right in the house. That way we could add calcium carbonate, which would line the pipes so that any lead in the pipes would be sealed in, and we could use the filtration to soften the water, because calcium chloride does tend to gum up your makes rings in the sink, and it gums up your hot water heater. Too much of it's not a good thing, but it does line the pipes. So you would sanitize the water with UV to kill any bugs that had come all the way from Sultan down to Lynnwood, and you would then have a filter which filtered out the excess calcium carbonate. Now, I had the pleasure of visiting the water facility. Do a Google search for Spada Lake, S-P-A-D-A. It's way up in the mountains, up above Sultan. It's gigantic, it's deep, and it lies at the convergence of the winds and storms which go around Mount Olympus to the north, and the winds and the storms which go around Mount Olympus to the south. And there they converge, and they dump 10 feet of rain a year. The water then travels down to Lake Chaplin, where the treatment plant is, and from there it's put in 4 large pipes, and it goes north, south, and west to fluoridate most Snohomish County water systems If you get far enough north, you don't get it. But all the way down to the county line, all the way to Edmonds, to Everett, Mukilteo, Snohomish is half fluoridated. Marysville is fluoridated. Monroe is fluoridated. I do believe Tulalip is. I don't know about Arlington, further north, or Stanwood. So it produces a vast amount of water, the purest water you can possibly drink, until they add toxic waste to it. How sad. And how impenetrable to logic are the city council people of Everett. I made probably 30 trips to lecture them, and they're all posted on WashingtonSafeWater.com. And let me remind you that you can follow along with these arguments by going to jamesrobertdeal.org/safewater. There are many fluorides. There's aluminum fluoride, and that's another reason why you don't want fluoride in your stomach, because the very acidic stomach, it will combine with aluminum. Now, there's aluminum in our food, and there's also aluminum injected to you if you get vaccinated with a flu vaccine. So aluminum fluoride can bypass the blood-brain barrier. Fluoride is a tool that carries aluminum into the brain where it doesn't at all belong. So you have sodium fluoride, fluorosilicic acid, which comes in a liquid form in tanker trucks, gigantic tanker trucks, $25,000 a load. $300,000 a year is spent just for the toxic waste fluoride by the city of Everett. Probably $1.5 million for King County. Pierce County is also fluoridated. Bellingham fought it off in the late 1990s. They tried to fluoridate Olympia, and the students and the environmentalists organized and fought it off. They tried to fluoridate Portland and fought it off, defeated it convincingly. It's hard to understand how the city council people of Seattle, of Everett, of Portland are so hypnotized. I just wonder if there's some secret way of controlling people's way of thinking foolishly. Well, in 2004, we read in the newspapers that there was lead in Seattle school drinking water. So I investigated this, and the levels were exceedingly high, up to 16 parts per billion. That's 1.6 parts per million. That's twice the level of the fluoride. So fluoride and lead and arsenic are in the same category of poisonousness. And 5 paper clips of fluorosilicic acid is enough to kill 50% of people who weigh in at about 150 pounds. And the other 50% are going to be exceedingly sick. Whereas the sodium fluoride that occurs naturally is not even classified as a poison. And you could eat an enormous amount of it, and it wouldn't kill you. It would certainly sicken you. And if you drink it for life, it's harmful in a different way than fluorosilicic acid, but still very harmful. Fluoride is added allegedly to reduce tooth decay. Now, if you read the CDC website, it only claims an 18 or 25% reduction in tooth decay. So that means that it is 82% ineffective. And usually the people who are behind fluoridation see that and talk about it as the solution. And they don't say anything about the other means for dealing with and preventing tooth decay. My regimen for keeping my teeth tooth decay free is I don't eat sugar, and if I do, I brush immediately. You do not need to brush with toothpaste or anything. The purpose of the toothbrush is to get the food off your teeth so that the bacteria, the Streptococcus mutans, doesn't go to work dissolving your teeth. And sugary foods turn acid, and the Streptococcus breeds in an acidic environment. I do brush with baking soda, and it makes your mouth alkaline, which again discourages Streptococcus. About once a week, I drip some iodine on my toothbrush. You can go to Amazon or to Seattle Super Supplements and get Lugol's 2% iodine in a dropper. You can put it in water and drink it. You can put it on your toothbrush and brush and swallow it. We're all under iodinized. We don't get enough iodine. It's in iodized salt, but I wouldn't recommend using iodized salt because of the other toxic things they put in iodized salt. So you need to get some kelp pills and take a kelp pill, 1 or 2 of them every day. And there are better ways to prevent tooth decay. We know that tooth decay is not prevented by fluoridation because Europe is 99% fluoridation free, and their rate of tooth decay has dropped just as much as in the United States in fluoridated cities. The studies which show the 18 to 25% reduction in tooth decay are very poorly done studies. Now, fluoridation is allegedly done to benefit the poor because they can't afford dental services. And I think dental services should be part of our medical system and part of single payer. At least regular preventive, and I'm not talking about necessarily straightening teeth and putting in fake teeth, but the contrary is true. Blacks, Hispanics, and the poor are more sensitive to fluoride, and the reasons are people with dark skin don't absorb as much, don't make as much vitamin D. The sunlight on your skin helps your body make vitamin D. Blacks and Hispanics who grew up in a sunny climate have darker skin and don't absorb as much vitamin D. They don't want to get overdosed, but then they come live in the north and they're vitamin D deficient. And most of us here, white or black or Hispanic, are vitamin D deficient in the wintertime. You need to supplement vitamin D. I recommend a vegan vitamin D. That's what I take during the wintertime. So, in terms of removing fluoride from your drinking water, what I recommend is the water distiller. Go to fluorideclassaction.com, and on the right side you'll see my water filter, $229 on Amazon. It's totally reliable. I figure that the cost of the electricity is about 30 cents per gallon. Some people say that water distillers are inadvisable because they take all the minerals out, and that's true. But why don't you just put some lemon juice in there if you're worried about minerals, or some sleepy time tea, one of my favorite. Not advisable to take black tea because it's one of the few plants that takes up fluoride. Sorry if you're a tea lover. Got to give up that black tea. So 41% of adolescents aged 12 to 15, the studies say, have some degree of fluorosis, dental fluorosis. And a smaller percentage, let me read this, 8.6% suffer from mild fluorosis, and 3.6% suffer from moderate and severe fluorosis. Mild fluorosis is white spots and some brown spots, with up to 50% of enamel impacted. 3% suffer from moderate and severe, which is white spots and brown spots, and sometimes pitting and chalky teeth, and up to 100% of enamel impacted. Even mild fluorosis can be distracting and ugly, and frankly, there's not much can be done for it. Very expensive to put veneers on. It's very, very sad. So let me talk about drinking fluoride and then putting it on topically and going to the dentist. So don't drink it, and be careful about which wine you drink, because most wines are grapes are sprayed with sulfuryl fluoride, and the fluoride levels are high. Go for an organic wine. I'm really concerned about which beer to drink, and I always go for a European beer like Guinness. Now, don't cook with it, and in terms of bathing in it, we bought a shower filter that contains bone char. Bone char is made of calcium. It catches the fluoride. Now, I'm a vegan. I don't do things that harm animals. So this is a slight contradiction in my principles. Regular shower filters only remove chlorine. Now, it's a good idea to remove the chlorine because you breathe it, and it's toxic. I mean, it killed people in World War I. So avoid it as much as possible. I'm afraid you can't avoid it in your clothes. Your clothes? Yep. You wash your clothes in fluoridated water. The water evaporates out in the dryer or out on the clothesline, and the fluoride stays in your clothes. And then you perspire during the day, and now you're taking a bath in fluoridated sweat. What about fluoride toothpaste? It does little or nothing for controlling bacteria. In fact, it leaves sticky film on your teeth, which is the perfect habitat for the bacteria to make a home. So if you do want to brush with something, brush with baking soda, or brush with water, or brush dry. Now you go to the dentist, and he's going to try to convince you to have a fluoride treatment for yourself or for your children. Don't. The fluoride in that gel is like 2,000 to 2,500 or 3,000 parts per million. And people have accidentally swallowed that stuff and died before they could get them to the hospital. And so the tray that the fluoride is in is taken off, and then you rinse it off, and now you've got a nice coating of veneer on your teeth. However, it all, sooner or later, comes off. If you go home and drink orange juice or soda or anything slightly acidic, it's going to come off because it's a very loose bond. It's not an ionic bond. It's a temporary bond between the calcium in your teeth and the fluoride. And it's not true to say that it forms a layer that's permanent. It's just a non-truth. And then when you finish your dental cleaning, they brush your teeth. How nice of them to give you a thorough brushing. What I didn't know, and then they use a pumice to to polish your teeth. The pumice contains fluoride, and you have to specifically ask for pure volcanic pumice, otherwise you're getting another dose of fluoride. Fluoridated toothpaste should be available by prescription only. It's absolutely ridiculous. What most people don't understand is that there are correlations of forces that are very hard to stop. If there's an enormous amount of cash flow and profits coming through, that cash flow develops around it a cadre of supporters, advertisers, media people, lawyers, accountants, and they make big donations to government. And then government arranges to have certain people appointed to the EPA and the CDC and the FDA and our Washington Health Department and our Washington Department of the Environment and even our governor. If you want to read about Governor Inslee and his fluoridation attitude, just go to jamesrobertdeal.org and search for Inslee. I corresponded in great detail with him, and he was completely impervious to logic on that subject. And he's also a supporter of mandatory vaccination. No exceptions whatsoever. No religious exceptions would be allowed. No philosophical objections would be allowed if his bill had passed. The only exception allowable would be medical exam. Medical exemption, it's real hard to get those. Because doctors are suckers too. Just because they have a lot of degrees doesn't mean they can't be bamboozled. I'm going to take a little break. And this is a 4-minute and 44-second song, so if you want to go get a sandwich, come back in 4 minutes and 44 seconds.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven up above. Give us this day our daily bread, as we share with those in need. Forgive us our wrongs as we forgive others' wrongs, and may we not be tested, but if we are, may we survive the test. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Amen. Robert Deal, February 28, 2017.
I'm back again, and I recorded that song back in February. Hope you like it. I went halfway through seminary, and then I decided that law was a better way to be religious. I focused not on doctrine, but on high ethical standards and high legal standards. So I'm subject to that same calling, but I've channeled it into law and ethics, which is, I think, the proper sphere for religion, and quit debating all these esoteric dogmas. But back to the subject of fluoridation. The FDA has jurisdiction over drugs, and the fluoride is added to the water to affect your body, to protect your teeth, and so it qualifies as a drug. It's only the FDA could approve of it. The FDA approves of fluoride toothpaste, but it also requires the poison warning. It says spit it out and call emergency poison control. If you swallow more than normally is used, you're supposed to use a pea-size amount, and most people put it on like a wedding cake. And if you have little children, you shouldn't have it in the house because they eat it. It tastes so good. By way of example, I was just giving that as an example. It's the FDA that can approve the use of fluoride topics. It shouldn't approve them at all. Now, the EPA could ban fluoridation, but it can't authorize it. It doesn't have that jurisdiction. But it does have set a maximum contaminant level and a maximum contaminant level goal. So, for poisons like lead and arsenic, there's a 15 part per billion maximum contaminant level for lead, and a 0 maximum contaminant level goal. Now for fluoride, the maximum contaminant level is 4 parts per million, which is an enormous amount. And the goal is 4. So these MCLs were rigged so that fluoridation could continue. But there's even a problem with that, because the regulations that 46 states have passed say that fluoridation has to follow the rules of NSF 60, National Sanitation Foundation 60, and that rule says that the concentration must be 1/10 of the maximum contaminant level or less, and 1/10 of 4 parts per million is 0.4 parts per million. That means the 0.7 parts per million that we're fluoridating is illegal under the laws of the state of Washington, most other states, many provinces, and many countries that do fluoridate, because they all tend to adopt EPA regulations. Now, EPA couldn't authorize fluoridation directly, so what it did is it found a trade association that would set up standards for it and declare it to be safe, and that organization is known as the National Sanitation Foundation. And the links to all this are found at jamesrobertdeal.org/safe water. So the EPA financed the establishment, wrote the charter, and continues even to this day to subsidize the National Sanitation Foundation in their certification of fluoridation materials as safe. NSF does not certify fluoridation materials to be safe and effective. That's what the FDA does. The FDA would never authorize the sale of a drug if they could only certify it to be safe. It has to be both safe and effective, because all drugs have contraindications, and even so there's no such thing as perfectly safe for any drug. And it is the NSF has a charter that was written by and with the assistance of the EPA that says that the fluoridation chemicals have to be no more than 10% of the MCL of the EPA. So that's what I wrote to Inslee about and said it's a clear violation of the law. Tell the public health department to decertify it, but nope, they wouldn't listen. The Safe Drinking Water Act says no regulation may require the addition of any substance for preventive healthcare purposes unrelated to contamination of drinking water. That is our founding fundamental document when it comes to the environment, and this is totally ignored. Unfortunately, it's worded in the negative and says no regulation may require. So the FDA doesn't require it, and the CDC doesn't require it, and the NSF doesn't require it. The FDA doesn't stop it, because the FDA is headed by pro-industry appointees. The scientists are against it within the FDA and within the EPA. Same way with the CDC. And so they don't require it. They just allow it. And then they encourage it. The CDC has a branch, a department that assists local water districts in making the transition. But the CDC doesn't require it. It's only the water districts that require it. The law should have said no federal or state or municipal utility may add any substance for preventive healthcare purposes unrelated to contamination of drinking water. But unfortunately, it was poorly drafted when the Safe Drinking Water Act was enacted. The Lynnwood drinking water you're consuming adds, on average, about 1.1 parts per billion of arsenic. Now, arsenic is a known type 1A carcinogen, known to cause cancer in humans, and no amount is acceptable. The fluorosilicic acid that is put in our water is a mutagen, a poison, and a probable carcinogen. Just a few grams of it is fatal to 50% of adults. It's bad for your kidneys. It's the kidneys that excrete fluoride, but they can only excrete about half of it. And in an infant with relatively undeveloped kidneys can only excrete about 20%. So fluoride hurts the fetus and the infant most of all, and correlates with spontaneous abortions. Is supposed to be harmful to sperm. If your kidneys are failing and you're taking kidney dialysis, the water used has to be fluoride free. Other symptoms: fluoride interrupts and inhibits enzyme action. It is an enzyme interrupter. It denatures proteins. It is an anticholinesterase inhibitor. It damages brain tissue. A Harvard study says it reduces IQ. It attacks the thyroid, pituitary, pineal, and it incorporates into atherosclerotic plaque in the coronary arteries and in the aorta, and it worsens cardiovascular disease. About 1% of the population is so sensitive to it that they can't even bathe in it. They have to relocate it. It causes osteoporosis in older women, and we often hear that so and so fell down and broke her hip. Well, in many cases, she broke her hip and fell down. Just the normal weight of her body on her fluorotic hip caused it to break, and then she fell down. We also have to bear in mind that some people don't just drink the average 2 liters of water a day. There are people who put roofs on houses and work in the sun, and farmers, and people who lay asphalt on the roads, and they drink 10 liters a day. And then there are diabetics who drink 10 liters a day. And then there are babies who drink the equivalent of 4 liters a day. So the dose is not controlled. It's the only drug that's administered where the dose is not controlled, and you take the drug forever. Another issue has to do with informed consent. This is a drug. If you take a drug, the doctor says, I'm prescribing this, and I said, Doc, I don't want it because it's in capsules, and the capsules are made of pork, beef, and sheep bones that are ground up and turned into capsules. So I said, do you have something in a veggie cap or a tablet? And then he wants to prescribe another drug. I don't really need that. I can deal with a little bit of pain, so don't give me the pain drug. So it's informed consent. If you have an operation, they have you sign a paper saying informed consent, but you're being given the drug fluoride, which is actually a toxic poison, without your consent. Lynnwood and all the other satellite cities surrounding Everett are what we call captive water districts. The City Council of Lynnwood nor the citizens of Lynnwood never had an opportunity to vote on whether to have their water fluoridated. And the City Council could write a stern letter to the City of Everett and say, you have 4 big pipes coming down from Lake Champlain, dedicate one of them to South County, and we just want plain water. Now, if you don't care about your own health, certainly you should care about the health of your salmon. Salmon are anadromous fish. They live part of their life in fresh water. That's where they're born. They grow up in the salt water, and they return to mate, propagate, and die in fresh water. So while they're living in fresh water, they crave salt. They need salt, so whatever salt there is in the water, they absorb. Then they go out into the ocean, and they quit absorbing salt. If they kept absorbing salt, they'd be dead. So they become salt excreting. And they do that for 5 years, and then they come back to the place where they were born in fresh water, and they have to switch back again and become salt absorbing. Fluoride in the water forms salts, which the fish absorb, and it kills a certain bacteria in their stomach, which is necessary for food digestion. And it does the same thing to your stomach. So if you've got a stomach that hurts, try to give up drinking fluoridated water. The level of fluoride at your tap is 0.7 parts per million now. So it goes to the sewer plant and it's treated, but the treatment filters and process cannot remove the fluoride. Fluoride ion is an extremely tiny atom, and the electron orbits very close to it, and so it slips right through, and so the fluoride level of the water coming out of the sewer plant down at Edmonds is about 0.7 parts per million, and 0.2 parts per million is enough to turn salmon around and kill them. We have had salmon crashes on the Snohomish River, the Columbia River, the Sacramento Rivers. Those are the ones that I read about and I've documented in my flyer, which is found at jamesrobertdeal.org/safewater, and you can also find it at fluorideclassaction.com/safewater. And it's easy to understand why you'd have a salmon crash on the Snohomish River, because in the summertime or fall, before the water is gushing through the river, you're going to have the water coming out of the sewer plant is going to be a significant proportion of the total water in the river, at least for 100 yards or a mile downstream from where the effluent is released into the river. So there are 4 cities on the Snohomish which put that Everett water toxin into their water, starting with Monroe, Snohomish, then Everett, and finally Marysville. So the salmon have to run 4 gauntlets. And we've had salmon crashes on the Sacramento River. Their beautiful salmon run is a shadow of what it used to be. And there's a link to what happened on the Columbia, just downstream from the John Day Dam, where Alcoa has its aluminum refinery, and some fluoride was going into the river, and it was turning back all the salmon and killing them, completely eliminating the salmon runs upstream from that point. So studies were done to determine what the problem was. So Alcoa had to remove that aluminum from the effluent flowing into the river. I should say one more thing about the origins of fluoride. Fluorosilicic acid is not naturally existing. Calcium fluoride, magnesium fluoride are naturally existing, and there are minute amounts of it even in the Lynnwood well, 0.07 parts per million. But it's calcium fluoride. It comes with its own calcium, so it's less harmful. So the EPA got going in the 70s and the 80s, and down in Florida we have superphosphate fertilizer plants. And the way you make superphosphate fertilizer is you take the phosphate rock and you add sulfuric acid. And it all goes up in a big cloud of smoke. And what you produce is superphosphate fertilizer, which by the way is unnecessary. If you want to add phosphate to your soil, you need to take phosphate rock and mix it with manure, an animal manure or green manure, and give it 6 months, and you got all the phosphate you need. And there's usually sufficient phosphate in the soil if you just manipulate the pH of the soil. So this smoke would go up the smokestack and poison the whole neighborhood and kill the cattle and burn the crops and make the people sick and etch the people's windows, since it dissolves glass. And so the EPA says you got to capture that. So they captured it in scrubbers, wet scrubbers in the smokestacks. And now they had fluorosilicic acid. But what do they do with it? It's got a lot of silica in it, which means it's hard to remove the silica. So the EPA let them dispose of it on site. And the amount grew and grew, and there were gigantic lakes of it. And they piled up the silica stones, little pebbles, around the lakes. And the lakes got higher and higher, 50 feet high. Gigantic lakes. And finally, they broke through into the aquifer that runs throughout Florida from north to south, permanently poisoning the Florida aquifer. So that's where your fluorosilicic acid comes from. It's toxic waste, scrubber liquor from the smokestacks to produce a product that's not even needed. That just goes to show you, once you get a cash flow growing, it's very hard to stop. August 1st is the election, and I hope you'll vote for me. I hope that you will forward my links to everybody in your contacts. There's also a donate button. Sure would appreciate that. And the links to forward are jamesrobertdeal.org/radio, jamesrobertdeal.org/platform. You might also send them jamesrobertdeal.org/safewater. Let's see. I'm going to close with another of my songs. Oh, this is my favorite.
Someday the Lord will come, that's what the good book has said, and he'll be punishing the wicked and rewarding the good. And was dead, condemned 'cause they failed to do unto others. They'll be making up excuses. They'll be making up excuses. They'll be making up excuses, saying we just never understood. There was a wise man down here, he was a teaching his truth. Matthew wrote his words down, unfortunately they were later burned. Mark, who spoke a different language, but doing the best he could. Mark, who never even met him, wrote again third hand. And so it ain't no surprise, and so it ain't no surprise, and so it ain't no great big surprise. He wrote it down half wrong. You sent us other prophets, you sent us messiahs and priestesses. Why, the one who came last year, she won the Nobel Prize for Peace. But they all are speaking esoteric languages that most of us don't understand. They are specialists too narrow to teach the overview. And so it ain't no surprise, and so it ain't no surprise, so it ain't no great big surprise. We still don't understand. But there be some of us that's trying to do your will, and so we think we have some right to ask one question still. Lord, 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 with all due respect, Lord, Lord, if it was all so important that we understand, Lord, if it was all so important, why didn't you make it clear? And so it ain't no surprise, and so it ain't no surprise, and so it ain't no great big surprise. We still don't understand. But there be some of us that's trying to do your will, and so we would presume to make one final request. Lord, 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 with all due respect, Lord, Lord, if it is all so important that we understand, Lord, even at this late date in time, please could you make it clear? So it ain't no surprise, and so it ain't no surprise, and so it ain't no great surprise. We're still trying to understand. James Robert Deal, February the 17th, 2017.